right. Welcome to the special edition of the Comic Watchers Show. My name is Chad Burdett. I'm part of the press team with the Comic Watch website. And joining me today is the creative team behind DC Comics' new horror miniseries, Soul Plumbers. How about you guys introduce yourselves?
My name's Henry Streetbeat Zabrowski. Out on the street, getting my feet, feeling the heat.
I'm Marcus Parks. Hello.
Nice to meet you guys. So before we jump into the talking about the series, tell me a little bit about your history with comic books, because you guys also have a horror podcast called The Last Podcast on the Left. So, tell me about your history with comics and how you guys came to, write, get this gig with DC Comics.
Actually, my pastor used to spank me with a rolled up copy of Superman for a very long period of time. And it's been incredible to go from there to here. It's always been with DC. So,
well, I've been reading comics my entire life, like since I was 5 years old. I've worked at comic book stores, and it's comic books have always been like a constant presence for me. Like writing comic books always seemed like kind of an unobtainable dream.
I didn't know how people got that job. It seemed like one of those fantasy jobs. Like, it's like becoming an ice cream tester.
Yeah, yeah. And on Last Podcast on the Left, like we reference comic books a lot. Like we talk about esoteric stuff quite a bit. So we always use the Invisibles as a really good touchstone for stuff. And, you can always make, Sandman references that, people will get, and Preacher's always been like a gigantic presence in my life.
And Transmetropolitan, I still think is like the most accurate view of what future we will get.
Easily.
I agree.
No. Yeah, no, absolutely. And so, like, one of the editors at DC, the woman that's in charge of the DC horror line, she was a listener of the show and heard how many times like we mentioned comics and used comics as a touchstone, and figured like maybe these guys want to write a comic book, maybe they have an idea in them, and so they got a hold of us and asked us like, do you got anything? And we made a couple of pitches to them, because it wasn't like I said, like comic book writing was always like a fantasy. Like, oh, that would be great. That would be really cool if I could do something like that. And then we pitched to them, and we pitched them like our grossest ideas, and our weirdest ideas, and they said, "Great, let's do it."
So let's talk about Soul Plumbers. How about you guys give like just an overview of the the book and who the characters are?
Well, you have Edgar Wiggins, who is he's a young boy who believes in the power of Jesus Christ. He is a weirdo. He is pretty gross, and he wants to get close to God, as close as he can get. And the problem is that God's not choosing Edgar.
No.
He's not choosing him. So he has to find a way to get himself in there. And the Soul Plumber world, like being able to go to this like place where it'd be like, I could be an exorcist. I can prove that God is real by handling a demon on my own. That's kind of like, it falls into his lap. And it's about Edgar and his friend Elk, who is a noseless veteran, who is technically Edgar's sweet side. Like Elk is like his fun counterpart in a way that kind of like brings good things out of Edgar, because he's a very isolated individual. And then we kind of see how things go awry when he thinks he's exorcised his demon, but instead he has brought a foreign interdimensional creature into our dimension that does not belong here.
Yeah. And the things about Edgar is that like Edgar is not only like trying to get close to God, like, but he is a true Christian. Like he actually does follow the tenets of Christianity. He listens to Jesus Christ's word, and he believes that, his lot in life, the way he serves God on earth is by helping other people. Like he's a genuinely good person, and he is trying to help others. But it's one of those things where, the road to hell is paved with good intentions.
Yeah, and he's all jacked up.
Yeah, he's yeah. He's all fucked up, and he's just very weird, very isolated. But he does have a very good heart. But it's this idea of like trying to help people. These like that's the book is a lot about. A lot of the book is about unintended consequences,
Mhm.
and how
There is no plan.
Yeah, there is no.
This book is about. Yeah.
Yeah, there is no plan. It's all chaos, and it's just how far one small decision made by one inconsequential person, how far that ball can roll.
Now, what are your guys' history with like the DC horror comics? Because reading it, I kind of got a little taste of the Jamie Delano, maybe some Peter Milligan.
Yeah.
So what where did you guys draw from other than your creative parts?
Well, for my taste, it's like while I've read a lot of comic books, I think more in film. So if we keep saying like Frank Henenlotter, in between Basket Case and Brain Damage, like all this, like these are his films were also very important to me. But Marcus can really probably take it with the horror comic books because you've read, I read Lock and Key, which I loved, but.
Yeah, Lock and Key's great, but I'm a huge Hellblazer fan. Like I've read the entire like that gigantic run. There's so many great writers that are on that run that do so many great things with horror. But the very first comic I ever read was a DC horror comic. Like when I was 5, I somehow came upon Swamp Thing number 32. The issue with the Pogo issue, where these little cute creatures come down to Earth, and one of them ends up getting eaten by a crocodile. And there's all this great imagery in it of like showing humans as these horrible monsters that are destroying the earth, and Swamp Thing as this mysterious creature that ends up becoming a friend. But the DC horror tradition is fantastic. Like the what is it? Is it A Feast for Crow or A Murder? But the Swamp Thing run that ties into Crisis on Infinite Earths.
Okay,
It's something about crows, but it's this idea, and I love that idea. How
I love
scary
that idea
it
of
was.
the goth version of There's Something About Mary's. It's called There's Something About Crows, and I just see a crow with the semen in its like feathers, like with it sticking up. That'd be kind of fun.
Yeah, but that book was so.
Here.
That storyline was so horrifying, because there's this crisis of this gigantic DC crossover event happening, but there's also this group of South American witches that are really the ones behind it. And there's so much great imagery that Alan Moore introduces in that, like this horrific imagery of like this woman that is giving her life over to these witches, and so they give her a black pearl, and she turns, and her body withers away, and she turns into just this head with crow's wings, and she flies off. It's going to drop the black pearl, and and cause the end of the entire universe. Like like DC's just their tradition of horror is fantastic. It's not the only horror influence that we have in comics, but DC's always been the best at it.
Man, as soon as this interview's over, I got to drop a black pearl. It's early for me. It's working its way through my system.
And of course, Sandman and and The Invisibles have a lot of great horror elements to it as well. There's the biggest horror influences that I have, and there's other like lesser known,
and
like
I like
Midnight Mass. Back in the Vertigo days in the early 2000s, it's great.
I'm big into short fiction, so like Thomas Ligotti, Robert Matheson, like that world, like idea of short horror fiction, also kind of like it informs you in how to create a structure of a comic book because it's about how to wrap it up, how to like tell little stories that can connect together.
So you're working. The artist on the book is John McCrea. How did you guys kind of get paired up with him? Did you pick him? Did he kind of choose?
Power of DC. Power of DC. They got him to come and join us. Because Marcus said like that. Yeah, the idea of like when they read it, they were like, "This is a Garth Ennis vibe." Not that they stole his vibe.
No,
we would never do that. We would never.
He's a big influence. Ennis is probably the biggest influence there. As far as like me and my comic rights, like Ennis, it's like what we wanted to do with this book is like half Ennis, half Morrison, with a little bit of Ellis sprinkled in. You know, like those are the guys that, you know, we grew up reading and were like the biggest influence. But yeah, they were just like, after reading it, they're like, this is very Ennis. Just fucking get John McCrea. Like, just get McCrea. He's like, obviously these guys have that vibe, and he's of course going to be able to match that vibe. And he matches our vibe perfectly. He picked it up. He picks up everything we put down.
Yeah, he crushes it. He's amazing.
Now, do you guys have a favorite character in the book? Maybe one you enjoy writing, or you know.
Well, there's one that's coming up. So far, I mean, I love Elk only just because like Elk is such a fun character. Like he is a brazen, like I know how to put it. He's been through so much as a dude that so now he just doesn't give a shit. So I love that about him. But I can't wait for you guys to meet the fuck mother.
Yeah.
I think that you really like this character. It's one of my favorite little brain seeds that we have coming up. And Patty's fun.
Patty's a lot of fun. Yeah, that's issue 3. And there's some like the villains that are coming up, you know, that start showing up in issue 3 and are especially going to get they're especially going to get, you know, blown out in issue 4. Those have been a ton of fun to write. But Edgar's he's a fun character to write as well. Like I like this because he's, for me, like he's kind of this because I grew up Henry grew up Catholic, but I grew up Baptist. You know, in a very small Texas town, a town of 300 people that had 5 churches. You know, that sort of like you get all those different Protestant influences. But I grew up like terrified of hell. Like I wasn't afraid of God. I was afraid of hell.
See,
like
funny
specifically.
Is that in the Catholic tradition, I was afraid of God.
Yeah,
right? I was actively afraid of God because
See,
that's really where the belief came from.
Yeah, for me, God was a guy I could make deals with. You know, like that. God was
you
like
can't make a deal with God. He watches you masturbate.
Well, that was yeah. It was like it was all about that. Just like if I stop masturbating for a week, will you let me pass this biology test? Like you can make deals with him. In the Protestant faith, you know.
What if I made you calm yourself while you're sleeping? Got you.
So like Edgar's like this. So I grew up like Christian, you know, and so like Edgar kind of pulls on the and grew up like you know, like actually trying to follow the tenets of Jesus and paying attention to what Jesus actually said. You know, of course, I'm not that anymore, but you know, it's fun to kind of go back and pull on that that little piece of my past and to kind of put it into Edgar.
Again, in the Catholic tradition, like that's where Edgar really fits because he really is such a like simp for Jesus. Like he is this like pathetic, like need, like he loves you. He's pure. But I guess I throw the pathetic on there because, you know, it's hard because I'm a Satanist. So I view that people who cower under God's might are like that. They are kind of in a way, they're giving up of control.
Yeah, and it's like he's Catholic, but he's more of he's a Jesus Christ fanboy.
He's like he esoteric Christian.
Yeah,
like he's
he does.
Gnostic.
Yeah, he doesn't go to church. Like he wants to have his own parish. He wants to lead people. He wears a collar, but it's all accoutrement, you know. It's nothing. Like he tried to go to seminary school. We'll get into that in episode 2, but he's something entirely different from a mainstream Christian.
Well, I would say my upbringing was the same as yours, Marcus. So, his character rang, you know, true to real life. So I'm really interested to see, you know, where this all goes. So kind of to wrap up here, who do you think, well, everybody should be reading it, but who definitely should be checking this out, and where can people, find your other stuff? Where can they find you on the social media? And tell us a little bit about your podcast.
I think that if you're a fan of horror, especially sci-fi horror, because this is like in the world of religious sci-fi horror. I kind of would call it that, right? So if that interests you, mixed with as much gore as we are legally allowed to put into a DC comic book, then you should read it because it's filthy. I think
if you're a splatter fan at all, then if you loved Cannibal Holocaust, then buy the book.
Yes, and I think that also, like, I think it's funny enough that you'll carry through. So, you know, for me it's that. And it's also for those of you that listened to last podcast and left, we really did not try to make it inside baseball at all, because the whole point is that we want to show that we can write stuff also that's kind of like outside of the podcast and do what we can do. But there's little what's it, Easter eggs for last podcast fans as well, littered throughout the issues.
Yeah, and it's, you know, our podcast, it's, you know, basically, I guess true crime comedy is the most basic way to describe it. But, you know, we've got almost 500 episodes.
Well, we
so
do everything. We do dark
everything.
history, aliens, ghosts, because we believe it
Magic,
all goes under one tent.
cults.
So, yeah, we out there. You could just type last podcast on the left into the computer box, and then a bunch of shit really pops up. We're on Spotify exclusively.
But also, this isn't our first time working with a comic book artist. Like, we have we have our book last book on the left that is kind of like it's a true crime, like it's an encyclopedia of serial killers, but there's a ton of illustrations within that are done by Tom Neely, who did, you know, Henry and Glenn Forever, which is fucking amazing. He did The Humans, which is also
we made
great.
a massive bound, very evil Mad magazine about serial killers.
Yeah.
Well, you know, again, the first issue looked great.
Thanks, man.
And you know, hopefully we'll be seeing more from you. And I think, you know, I definitely want people watching this interview to check it out when it comes out. And when does it come out exactly? And when will it be available?
October 5th. Order from your local comic book store. This is what we've been trying to tell people. We've been messaging it on last podcast on the left and saying it to as many people as possible. Go to your comic book store, order it from the guy, even who's like, actually, I don't know if we can do. I don't mean to make fun. I immediately make fun of comic book sellers, and I'm sorry.
Yeah, and that's not true. I've only run into a couple of guys like that. I used to work at a comic book. I worked at 2 different comic book stores throughout my life.
He's not like that at all. He's never well actually me one time.
I was always very, very nice to the customers. I was very, very nice to the customers, no matter who came in. I made it a point to be nice.
Store. I can't say anything. I worked at a video store, and I did the same thing. Like, oh, this movie, huh? Okay. Yeah. American Pie. Okay.
Well,
and when you're in the comic book store ordering the book, there's also a ton of other great horror comics out right now. There's Ice Cream Man. There's Nice House on the Lake. You know, there's Department of Truth. There's the Immortal Hulk. Silver Coin was really solid. It kind of went under the radar, but it's really fucking good. There's so many. Red Room, Ed Pisker's Red Room, if you're looking for splatter and gore. He also did like Hip Hop Family Tree and all kinds of shit. So yeah, there's so many great horror comics out right now.
Well, I want to thank you for taking the time today to chat a little bit, and, you know, stay safe, stay healthy, and definitely when you go to order this book, and you should go to your local comic book shop, support them.
Always.
And hope to, you know, hear about some more things coming from you guys soon.
We better. You all better hear some stuff coming from us. Real stuff.
All right. Well, as the guy who usually hosts this says, be nice to each other, be great to each other, and you guys be safe, be healthy, and we'll be in touch.
I'll do my damnedest.
All right. Thank you very much.